International, bringing you contemporary and pertinent psychological discussions.
فرغاه أحب لقاء يظل يجيء إلى
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Radio Islam International. My name is Muhammad Amin. I'll be your host until 10, inshallah. In studio, we have Maulana Zaheer Raggie. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to the listeners of Radio Islam, Radio Al Ansar, and all those that have joined us on the Ummahat platform. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, we are discussing the topic you are loved, and in our last discussion, we were discussing about we hear about domestic violence crimes in which narcissists push people so far with their abuse that their victims react in self-defense and anger, but they're also often blamed. We also discussed about the Quranic verse that many abusers quote to justify physical abuse, the verse of the Quran, "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa," where we came to the part وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ. And we mentioned that this ayat of beating them lightly, it refers to a symbolic action, not a physical step. And we mentioned that people need to understand there's two steps that are mentioned before it. You don't go straight to the third step. It's first two steps. The first intellectual step, that is the husband communicates with the wife. Then it's the second step where the abandoning of the bed, and then the physical step comes. And that's also not to cause damage or anything, but just as a reminder that something is not right. We also discussed that most people don't like to be hit with anything. And when you're doing this, you're actually destroying the person who they are. This is the mindset, destroying your faith, destroying your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thereafter, we went to the topic of narcissistic parenting. We mentioned that how narcissists are raised in a Muslim home. And we mentioned that if you find a youngster, it's always difficult to identify if a youngster will grow up to be a narcissist because kids behave in that way. It's only in the teenage years that you will find narcissistic traits, and this is the stage where parents should be concerned. And thereafter, we came to the Quranic ayat where we have to question ourselves that what is the objective of marriage and why am I having kids? And we mentioned there were three components: tranquility, love, and mercy, and a person needs to have all three components.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Jazakallah for that, Mauna. We continue, and in our discussion relating to narcissistic parenting, it's important that we start with this ayah, the ayah of Surah Rum, ayah number 21, where Allah Ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, that Allah Ta'ala created partners for yourselves, that you may find sakina, tranquility in them. He placed between you love, mawadda, mercy, rahmah. The importance of this ayah lies in the intended outcome of a Muslim marriage. Now, we are talking about relationships, and we are also discussing how parents need to react to each other and how a relationship should be built. And in order to have this discussion, it is important that we look at this verse. And as you have said, and we mentioned that last week, the three main components that make a marriage happy, peaceful, and successful. And if these components aren't present in a marriage, then it's no longer considered to be a relationship that Allah Ta'ala wants of us. And a kind and civil and an easy divorce becomes an option for those whose marriages are deprived of the objectives of marriage. Now, a spouse is considered, a partner is considered to be a very great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us on our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to help us in our journey towards a beautiful year after. And that's also one of the objectives of marriage. And the primary purpose of marriage is to find peace, to find contentment, to find tranquility, love, support, comfort in our spouses. And the main purpose behind having a good Muslim husband or a good Muslim wife is that they may help us, our partners, our husbands and wives, are supposed to help us face the trials, the tests of this life, and to remind each other to always do the right thing that is required of us by Allah Ta'ala, and to encourage the continuation of practicing Islam, such as our daily salah, so that we can establish an Islamic home, an Islamic lifestyle filled with faith, and a mindset that can be gifted to the next generation via our children. And that's the whole purpose of marriage, which will continue for generations to come. Now, we need to understand that in order to achieve that, the objectives of marriage are required. Now, let's look at some of the words that Allah Ta'ala uses in this ayah. The first one is sakina. The word sakan in Arabic implies that a couple may find comfort in one another. It implies that there must be a sense of being in a place of safety, in a place of refuge, in a place of stability. Now, sakan involves all these meanings. That within the home, there must be peace, there must be comfort, there must be refuge, there must be safety. And the word sakina means peace, which refers to having a peaceful home wherein there is no shouting, there is no abuse, and a home where peace of mind is established, knowing that the person we are married to is loyal, the person we are married to is trustworthy. In other words, it's important to feel safe and secure with our partners so we can develop a deep, intimate connection and relationship with them spiritually, intellectually, and physically. Now, it's during our trials, it's during our hardships, and the world we live in is filled with challenges. And it's during our challenges, it's during our trials, hardships, that we need the support of our partners, and we need and appreciate the safety and comfort of our spouses, and the most when they are present with us. Love, which is an objective of marriage, blossoms, and everyone around us will benefit from a positive energy that partners and spouses may make available to each other, which then helps our children. And that's why we're talking of narcissistic parenting. But before that, the type of home that we should establish. Another word that has been used here by Allah Ta'ala is mawadda. And mawadda translates to a kind of love that is deep and has been grounded with the spiritual source. It goes far beyond the dopamine fueled passion. It goes beyond the infatuation that's present at the beginning of a relationship. Someone who deeply loves you will go above and beyond every limit to fulfill their duties, and will always be happy and enjoy seeing you being happy. And that's the type of mawadda that Allah Ta'ala desires, that partners would want to see their partners happy. And they will try their best to support you in any way that they can and lift your spirits, lift your nafs by encouraging you to even pursue what you want to do, what your passions are, to have a good connection with Allah Ta'ala, do what you love that's good for you, and help you to be a better Muslim. And this is the type of love that Allah Ta'ala talks about here. This type of love is often communicated by our actions to each other, our gestures to each other, our affection that meets our human emotional need for love, our human emotional need for romance and for intimacy. And that's the type of love that Allah Ta'ala desires that a home should have. Now, in Islam, love is an expression of showing gratitude. It's an expression of showing appreciation for the blessings which we have, which should be practiced regularly in a relationship. Now, we find many studies found that couples who work together as a team, who express their appreciation regularly, report much higher levels of contentment, happiness than those couples that don't do that. And this beautiful aspect of love gives us the ability to live with one another despite our differences, as conflicts are resolved in a kind, patient, respectful manner. So every relationship will have conflicts. But the important thing is if that home and that conflict is in a home that is filled with sakina, love, with security, safety, refuge, and filled with the love that is desired, the Islamic concept of love, then we will be able to resolve our conflicts in a kind way, in a patient way, in a respectful way. And the third part of the objective of marriage, which Allah Ta'ala talks of in this ayah, is rahmah, mercy, which is a great contributor to peace. It's a great contributor towards love. And without it, without rahmah, without mercy, one cannot have a happy, healthy marriage. The element of mercy ensures that we won't oppress each other, we won't be cruel to each other, we won't abuse each other, we won't deprive each other of the marital rights, and the ability to show patience, kindness, empathy, compassion, and tolerance are the characteristics of true believers. These are the traits of believers. And these traits that I've just mentioned, patience, kindness, empathy, compassion, tolerance, are the total opposite of narcissistic traits. And these positive traits allows space for love to grow in our relationships. For example, a husband who helps his wife with the responsibilities and duties of the house is in fact showing mercy towards her, especially if she is, for example, ill, when she is pregnant, when she has young children, and a wife who does not pressurize her husband for things she knows he's unable to afford is also a way a wife is showing mercy and compassion towards him at the same time. It is also merciful, it is a merciful act to provide a safe environment for your spouse to live in. To provide a safe environment in a home is also a merciful act. And so that you don't fear being in the home with the presence of a partner, returning home each day knowing they will or may be abused. Now, this also explains the question of which we spoke of at length in one of our previous discussions, although it is not the correct and appropriate word to use, but we're using it for the sole purpose of understanding. It explains the question of rape, forced sexual relationship that cannot and will not be witnessed in a home that is coupled with sakina, that is coupled with mawadda, that is coupled with rahmah. Now, this brings us our discussion to the important point of understanding the type of home a Muslim narcissist was raised in that did not have sakina, that did not have mawadda, that did not have rahmah. So if a home did not have these three components and these three objectives of marriage, then we find that is a home wherein children will be born and grow up to have narcissistic traits. The abandonment of these elements in a marriage and the poor choice of a partner who is incapable of meeting high moral standards and providing a safe family environment are what significantly contributes to the development of both narcissistic and codependent personality disorders in children. Now, we spoke of both. We spoke about codependence, we spoke about narcissistic traits, and a home wherein sakina, a home wherein mawadda, a home wherein rahma, and we went into details of describing these very comprehensive terms that Allah Ta'ala uses in the Quran. A home that is void of this is an excellent breeding place for developing children that may develop these negative disorder traits, which today in our modern technology or modern communication, we use the word as narcissistic traits. Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu, for example, has narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has said, a woman without a husband, meaning divorced or widowed, must not be married until she is consulted, and a virgin, one who is not married, must not be married until her permission is sought. Now, this is a hadith which I would like to discuss under the ayah of Sakina, Mawadda, and Rahma. And this all goes as a prelude towards our actual discussion of narcissistic parenting. Now, in this hadith, subhanallah, we are advised to make very thoughtful decisions in regards to who we marry and consult elders and wise elders, practicing Muslims, about who we should marry, because it's a decision that will shape the rest of our lives and affect the next generation. So subhanallah, this is such a beautiful hadith that we sometimes just look at it on face value and do not understand the depth and the great advice that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is providing us for here, because we are advised to make a very thoughtful decision as to who we marry, and also consult very wisely, because the decision will shape the rest of our lives and also affect the next generation. The opposite of this is the result in a large number of unfortunately resentful men and women who don't love their husbands and wives and find it difficult to fulfill their marital duties towards each other, making them either feel guilty or sometimes even act rebellious, and therefore prone to verbal, spiritual, and physical abuse. So if the choice of your partner is not done correctly and you do not consult correctly, the result can be a regret, and that regret plays out as verbal, spiritual, physical abuse if they are not, or if they are married to narcissists. Furthermore, a narcissistic man who sees that a woman is not respected by her family, a narcissistic husband or a man who observes that the woman is not respected by her family member, will ultimately not respect her either and abuse her as well. And that has a chain reaction in the children that lives in that home. On the other hand, a good man, if she is lucky, will feel sorry for her and do his best to take care of her, knowing it's not her fault that she has a problematic family. So that woman who he is married may come out from a home that was abused, and the man that is a good man will use his ability to help and support her in order to come out from that physical abuse, emotional abuse that had a result on her upbringing. If they do marry, on the other hand, narcissists, it's highly likely that they will end up causing severe physical and psychological damage to each other because of the constant fights over power, constant fights over dominance, and trying to outsmart each other. Many marriages today, we find that husband and wives are wanting to outsmart each other instead of helping each other. The children who are born into these homes always grow up with a plethora and a multiple mental health issues, and unfortunately, as a result of that, become narcissists as well. And if they fail to please their parents, then they may become codependent and seek validation elsewhere. So if the home is a home that is filled with abuse, that is filled with constant shouting, which is filled with parents constantly in this effort of outsmarting each other, either those children will now find validation outside the home. So if they fail to please their parents, then such children in that home may become codependent and seek validation elsewhere. But usually they are brought up and programmed to be narcissists as well and copy the behavior of both their parents. They are often the worst school bullies. Today we find that bullying has become a big issue in schools. And often the worst school bullies who receive no love at home and take out their stress, their frustrations, and anger on others, and sometimes including the siblings. Remember, narcissists love to target men and women who come from dysfunctional families. And in most cases, women are tolerant. In most cases, women are tolerant of marital abuse. And they are tolerant of marital abuse because they are used to dealing with narcissistic men in their families as well, who have clearly communicated to them that they won't be accepted back into their family home as divorcees and will have everyone look down upon them. These type of women, including sometimes the mothers of such wives, who are often miserable too, fear that they won't be able to get married again if they are divorced, especially if they have children, and therefore such women are forced to just choose to stay in such homes. And in such families and societies, divorced women are perceived as failures, as it's assumed that they were divorced as a result of a terrible mistake or a sin that they might have committed, or they are divorced because of having bad character, who are unable to run a household, and who are not able to be good wives. This, unfortunately, brings shame and embarrassment to their families as they feel that they did not do a good enough job to raise their daughters to be moral and good wives. Example, that is being very submissive, chaste, well-mannered, skilled in housework, and that this toxic cultural mentality towards divorced women is what lessens the chances of getting remarried again. Hence why we see so many mothers become angry, become distressed when their sons who haven't been married before introduce them to a divorced woman whom they would like to marry. Women are simply and wrongly perceived as faulty goods, even though they are sometimes or usually far more mature than women who haven't been married before and have more realistic expectations of men in marriage. They are also more likely to appreciate a good man if they experience living with someone who was abusive, who did not take care of them. As the saying goes, you will not appreciate the sweetness of a good apple before you've tried a sour one. Marana, you want to bring anything in? Maybe I'm just talking too much. Some from our listeners,
Well,
if they want to say anything.
it's It's very important that what Mara is bringing in, especially in today's time, and we've seen that, especially Mara mentioned that, the mothers, when the young son is bringing in a lady that maybe may have been divorced, and it has no problem. There was no problem from her side, but just the fact that she has been divorced, it already puts like a so-called red flag to the mothers. And we're also waiting for the input of the listeners. Any input that you have, you can WhatsApp us on 0727861548, 0727861548. One, we can get it.
Now, we're talking about marrying divorced women. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, subhanallah, himself married divorced women. And he treated them no less than she who was not. In fact, to marry divorced women who entered a relationship lawfully. Just observe what I'm saying, man. To marry divorced women who entered a relationship lawfully is more honorable than marrying women who have had a string of boyfriends and engaged in unlawful intimacy with them. However, we find that a blind eye is often turned with young women who have had boyfriends because they are young, beautiful, and didn't have the status of being divorced. In Allah's eyes, it's more pious for a woman to be married and divorced 10 times. Every marriage procedure needs to be followed the correct way, with honorable intentions, and both families being aware and involved in the process for her protection, than for her to have one unlawful relationships. Unfortunately, many Muslims put the laws and approvals of society above the laws and approval of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's also something that we need to keep in mind. Men also worry about a divorce, especially when they have children. The worry about leaving their children alone with a toxic mother, or about the children being raised by a problematic stepfather. It concerns them that they won't be able to see their children often if they get a divorce, and that the divorce and child custody procedures will be lengthy, expensive. They also have the same worries about getting remarried to someone good who will accept them and their children. And due to all these reasons, we find many men, even after they are divorced, prefer to stay, or many men rather would prefer to stay in a toxic marriage because they can't be bothered and have no energy to go through the stress, financial losses, and hassles of a divorce. It's also daunting for them to even think about starting a long and tedious search for a new wife. And despite the many changes that have recently taken place, we find that recently, alhamdulillah, there has been a change to remove the stigma attached to divorces. Many women choose to remain in their abusive marriage because they fear that it would be difficult for them to remarry and don't want to go through the humiliation or the emotional pain that would be inflicted upon them, sometimes by their own family members and by society, to make them feel inadequate.
Shimon, we have a question that is coming. Assalamu alaikum. I'm definitely married to a narcissist for 18 years and I feel stuck because I'm afraid of hurting my children and turning their lives upside down. I don't see a way out. It's quite scary.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we are talking about, no? And we need to keep in mind that we need to be aware of these things. We need to make the right choices. I cannot answer the question on behalf of this lady that is asked, but these are issues that the community is facing, and these are hard facts that we need to be addressing. Whilst we talk about divorce, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated that the most hateful of halal matters to Allah ta'ala is divorce. Some ulama have said that this narration is weak. However, if you look at how so many Muslims use this to justify the shame they inflict upon divorced women in particular. We can see that if it's truly the most disliked act that's permissible by Allah, then it will also be so because Allah knows how many people will be unjust in the divorce process. So, whilst we're talking about this hadith that it's the most hateful of halal matters in the eyes of Allah, which is divorce, and many people use this hadith to use it to justify the shame they inflict upon divorced women in particular. I see someone has said, my mother is married to a narcissist. You can get more narcissists. You can't get more than him, but she won't leave because she needs security for her children, which is totally an invalid reason. What about kids growing up in a home where grandparents' marriages are lacking the basic components of marriage, and a child's mother with grandparents? I mean, now we're seeing so many people talking about this. So let's continue with our discussion. Or you want to say something?
No, I was just reiterating that many people are saying that this topic does need to be addressed.
Yeah. So now let's look at this hadith. Whilst it is the most hated thing in the sight of Allah, and sometimes people use this hadith to justify the shame they inflict upon divorced women in particular. We can see that let's look at this hadith from a different angle. If it's truly the most disliked act that's permissible by Allah, then it will also be one of the reasons why it is so disliked by Allah, yet permissible, is because Allah knows how many people will be unjust in the divorce process itself. It's also an indirect message for us to make sure that we marry people with whom the chances of divorce would be very low. And therefore, we spoke about all those red flags. Marry people with whom the chances of divorce would be very low. Our ummah's strength is built on a foundation of a strong family unit. And we know how detrimental the consequences can be on our societies when the foundation is built on weak, broken homes in which Islam, love, and peace are non-existent. And Allah Ta'ala is aware that not everyone will divorce in a kind and just way. Allah Ta'ala is fully aware that we, in the times that we are living in, we are observing that much more frequently, that not everyone will divorce in a kind and just way, which will lead to the eventual destruction of society. If our men, women, children, and homes are regularly being broken by abusive individuals, so whilst Allah has given us the right to a divorce, should second peace, safety, mawadda, love, rahmah, mercy not be present in their marriages, because people aren't making the required efforts to ensure that these elements are present to keep a family together, especially if there are children involved, then yes, it's not pleasing to Allah that a divorce should happen as a result of individuals intentionally creating a toxic marital home environment to live in. Therefore, it goes without saying that if peace, love, and mercy are not present in the marriage Allah wants us to have, then they definitely won't be present in what Allah ordered to be a kind and civil divorce procedure. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. A divorce would surely be a hateful thing to Allah when it's done in an oppressive, cruel, stressful, immoral manner by Muslims who are careless and are not behaving as true Muslims should behave. Children copy the behavior of their parents. So boys will often turn out like their fathers, and girls will often turn out like their mothers. There's a famous saying that goes, if you want to know how a girl will become when she's older, look at her mother. And the same goes for boys who are very close to their fathers and who idolize them. When boys see their mothers as being weak and unable to stand up for themselves against their abusive fathers, in many cases, such a mother is only being patient and staying in the marriage for the sake of the children, as we've seen some of the people have mentioned today to us. They will start to exhibit the same behavior towards her. Such boys and sons will exhibit the same behavior towards her because they see this as being normal and will form an ongoing belief that this is how wives and women in general are to be treated. They will always compare women to their mothers and expect them to be as submissive, tolerant, and as patient as their mothers are, and simply don't understand women who find their bad behavior and attitude as unacceptable. I've come across an example during a research of a counselor who writes that she was coaching a woman through a difficult marriage who had two boys. One was a 5-year-old and the other 7-year-old. Her husband was a narcissist, and he knew how much she was attached to them. And so he kept threatening to take the children if she applied for a divorce. And due to her greatest fear of losing her children to him, she stayed in the marriage and endured a lot of verbal abuse, disrespect, manipulation. Both her children went through the unfortunate ordeal of watching how their father treated their mother until disrespect became the norm to them. Her eldest son would shout and say the same things as his father and often answered back even to the grandparents. Now, these are things that we see that happens when a home is void of peace, security, love, rahmah, mercy. And therefore, we need to learn how to manage our homes in a way that we establish the objectives of marriage in our home to prevent our children of falling prey to similar habits that they observe in the home.
Well, a few questions have come in. First one, my husband married the third time, and when he married the second time, he said it's my fault. My son and daughter are adults now, they don't want to get married and behave the same way. I'm left with this problem now that he has given me a second talaq already. Please make dua for me.
Allah make it easy. We are seeing more and more of this, our homes, our Muslim homes, experiencing these difficulties. And as much as how difficult it is to discuss, and we went on this journey of having this topic, it was a very difficult choice. But because what we are seeing and experiencing, we have decided to discuss this to assist our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and basically our ummah in managing these difficult times that we are living in.
Another question coming out. Assalamu alaikum, how are you, Mulana? Is it worth it living in these marriages when the children are being damaged?
Personally, in my personal view, that if the objectives of marriage, peace, security, love, mercy are not maintained, then we are failing in the objectives of marriage, and then it is not worth continuing in a marriage which is failing to observe the objectives of marriage which Allah Ta'ala has ordained.
Yeah, my daughter is married to a narcissist. It's 14 years she is married, but not allowed to come home and stay with her family. He tells her if she wants to go home, she must go and not come back and leave all the children behind. She's physically and mentally unstable at this very moment. Myself as a mother, I am lost and don't know how to help my child.
Yes, living with a narcissist can cause mothers to lose their own loving, feminine, and caring maternal side with children. Living with a narcissist can result in mothers to lose their own loving, feminine, caring, maternal side with children, as they are always burdened with so much stress and anxiety to deal with. And according to Islamic teachings, the period, you want to say something about?
No more marking.
No, if there's someone that wants to say.
Just one more there that has come in. Excellent discussion. Shukran for being frank and open. I think this they went a bit further. They asked, what is the role of the trauma of abortion, family planning? That is, he doesn't want children in a relationship.
Yes, again, here, where a husband does not want children in a relationship goes against the objectives of marriage. It goes against the right of a mother to be a mother. And there is a serious problem for a husband to be behaving in that way. And this case needs special counseling, and there are lots of people that they can go to get help. And maybe the husband should be spoken to and explained. Let's not rule that option out. These are things that sometimes some people and some men do not want to have a responsibility of taking care for a family, but they need to understand. And I think the need here is proper, positive counseling is required for the husband. So according to Islamic teachings, Marana, the period from being a newborn until the age of 7 is the most critical, as a child's need for love, a child's need for acceptance, a child's need for unconditional love and patience. This will help shape their view of what parenthood and family should be like. So from newborn till the age of 7, what they observe in the home is what will shape them. Children need nurturing, and their minds are like sponges. So what they see and what they learn in the first 7 years of their lives will also shape their personalities as they grow. So if a boy is deprived of love, if a boy is deprived of affection and kindness as a child, he will start to lose empathy towards others. He will be indifferent towards those around him, as he's not being taught at home how to look after his own spiritual heart and practice good moral behavior. Some boys may also live with double standard narcissistic fathers who are superficially practicing, but their actions are totally contrary, and so they grow up to practice Islam in the same manner where the spiritual and moral elements are missing. And there are no joyful spiritual moral gains from their prayers and other worship rituals. In other words, they will go with their father to the masjid to perform, and they will see that their father, how he is outside. But the minute if he comes home and he has his narcissistic traits which he abuses, and the home is not filled with mawadda, rahma, narciss, and not filled with sakina, then that child, that boy, will grow up with that type of feelings. And there will be, the elements are missing where there are no joyful, spiritual, moral gains from the practices of Islam that he's observing of his father. To them then, praying, even becoming a hafiz, memorizing the Quran, are just, it's just chores that need to be done. It's just something, it's a task that needs to be done to look good for their parents and prove to others that they are good Muslims. As a result of this, these children don't know how to solve their mental health issues and are very likely to either become extreme in their practicing to gain social approval, or sometimes even abandon Islam later in their lives. And we see many a times children that grow up in good religious homes, they become extreme in their approaches about deen, or at a later stage they just abandon Islam and abandon Islamic practices. And all this is because of a home that is void of the objectives of marriage. And therefore we say that when a home is void of the objectives of marriage, we need to seriously look at that, assist ourselves, in getting the right counsel, doing the right things, bringing about the objectives of marriage in that home. And after every effort, if those objectives are not met, then it is senseless continuing in that type of a home.
Why can we stop our discussion
Yes.
today? I seen Brother Zaid is giving us the
He wants to go to the marketplace.
to go to the markets. Well, Jazakallah for your time, much appreciated. Inshallah, we'll speak again next week, Wednesday. We'll
Inshallah.
continue with this narcissistic parenting.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wrap it, pack it, fill it, close it.